Leaf magazine started in the year 2014, and before that also for a couple of years, Vikas, me, Sir and some other people also were concerned with the field of education. And in our own way, we were trying to work with children and evolve creative ways of teaching and interacting with students, things which did not happen in a regular coaching center and things also which did not happen in a school. So we were trying to create a domain which was neither the school nor the coaching center, something in between, yet something meaningful and something which made a difference in the way that these children would later grow on to be individual adults. We always felt that there was a lot of writing going on in educational circuits about what education should be, the kind of changes we ought to bring in the field of pedagogy, and also in terms of policy reforms. Either something like this was going on, or at the grassroots, some distinct individuals were taking up the cause of educating poor children, of Dalit children, of tribal children, of marginalized children. But we felt that both these initiatives were extremely important, and we couldn't imagine a world without these. But we felt that both of these initiatives had problems. The first kind of initiative, which was only primarily an academic engagement with the field of education, had its own paradoxes. We would deal with it, relate to it, read about it, write about it, attend seminars and take part in seminars. But it would be different from the life that we lived as ordinary individuals. So we would kind of come back from a seminar, and that's about it. Our lives would be completely different, for example, from the philosophy that we preached or wrote about. The saddening statistics about the number of children still illiterate, the saddening statistics about dropout rates, and everything would be all part of our academic papers. But little would they affect the way that we lived our lives. So we thought that there is some kind of a void between these two domains. The second domain also, as I said, that we've met wonderful individuals who are very talented in their fields, are extremely educated, but have still thought that they want to go back to their villages or go back to communities and work with ordinary people. They are not getting a name, they are not getting enhanced biodata, they are not getting a high-paying job, they are not getting anything utilitarian. But still they've chosen to lead a life which has a meaning, and a meaning that most people don't understand. And we were aware that these two kind of engagements are taking place in the field of education. But there was still some kind of dissatisfaction, and we kept thinking, kept wondering, what is it that we are looking for? What is it that we would do given a chance? And then came up the idea of the New Leaf. And for people who are with us throughout this journey, you people would know that we first called ourselves the New Leaf. And the New Leaf meant that after the rainy season, when a tree has new leaves, those leaves have a very beautiful light green color. And as seasons pass, as days pass, those light green leaves become dark green leaves. And a transformation takes place. And slowly after becoming dark green, they become brown, and then one fine morning they fall off the tree. And that's the story of a leaf. But if we ask what is the worth of the leaf, then the worth of the leaf is the part when it was completely light green, when it came into the world with all its freshness, all its dreams. And it knew that there would be a day when it would be gone forever. But the purpose of its existence lay in it being born and bringing some sort of a hope into this world. But gradually then we had to change our name, and then we was thinking that what could be as philosophical, as meaningful, as profound as a leaf. We thought that the next closest word would be leam. And leam in Old English means a ray of light. So through this word, also, through the name of the magazine also, we are trying to propagate a philosophy that our team closely believes in, and that is that through the small initiatives that we take up, through the little things that we do to take this initiative further, we will be able to bring about some light somewhere in some person's life. And we are not aiming at transforming the world. My revolutionary friends always tell me that, "Tum isse kya revolution le aogi?" So I keep telling them that I am not aiming at getting a revolution anywhere. Even if I am able to touch one person's life for a single moment, I feel that my purpose in life is solved. So with that effort and with that, we have started this Rising. Over the last 2 years, we've jumped into a lot of things. We are working with school children. We have started a humanities sensitization program, wherein we travel to various colleges, universities and schools and work with students who have taken up arts in 11th and 12th. And as most of us would know that at least at the school level, students are very low, not very motivated in taking up these subjects, and for most students these are only secondary options. If they do not get science or commerce, they are dumped into humanities. So it's a compulsory kind of an option. And so if somebody's interaction with the discipline starts like that, the person also grows up dissatisfied with the vocation that he or she will likely take up in future also. So we are working with students at various levels, and our new booklet has also come on this topic only, and we are working with students. Some of our students are here also. So we will get a chance to interact with them later on. We've been working with them for the 6-7 months.
When I was thinking of this topic, the burden of knowledge, there were 5 phrases that came to me. The phrases were, which is something that I feel go together if I were to ever, think of completing this whole task of education that I have been interested in some ways. And those were originality, insight, action, care and compassion. When we educate, for example, the first clip that you saw, you talked about burden of knowledge. I think that traditionally when we think of burden of knowledge, we see a child loaded with a school bag, going to school. That's a traditional image that we see, and it just does communicate a lot, because this is the same image that is being built on up to the higher education level, where what you find is again the same thing, in some ways perpetuating the academic degrees, the papers, publishing, the race for publishing with the new APIs, it's even much more, and the sheer meaninglessness of it at some level, as though knowledge is something that can be fossilized, that can be metered, that can be measured, and that can be something that can be, a way of also getting ahead in this very market-oriented world where education is also a commodity in a sense. So that is the way in which generally knowledge has been perceived. And how does one quite break the structures of this and really have a kind of an education that is like rain on our beings, which sort of helps us grow, which helps us, put out these new leaves that we have within our being, which is not something that is that has been made, and it's not utilitarian in nature. It is not an end to something else, which is an end in itself. So these are some of the questions I felt were very, very important for an educator. And I feel when I look at education today, whether it's school education or it's college education, I feel spaces are getting very crowded. It's when you look at the spaces that we come and inhabit, there is always this push, this hurry to know more, to read more. Oh, I haven't read this, I haven't read that, this still remains. What if I don't read this? And there seems to be this hurry to know everything, and there seems to be very little space to pause, think, to be original, to actually think of something that makes meaning to me, which I have thought of, which is my, own sense of what life is all about. These spaces of silence, of quietness, of assimilation, of a kind of inner flowering, I would say. These are very, very few. And there is this immense space to know everything, as though everything was a commodity. Have you read that? There's a lot of means dropping in education. Even what we read, do we really know what is it that we are reading? So in that sense, I feel these spaces are getting extremely crowded. And the second thing, so in a sense, the nourishing of originality, something, a thought that comes to you as something that is very critical to you in terms of your knowing yourself and knowing the society that you are in. I think those spaces, those little discomforts, those little discontents that we have with everything around you, those need to be nurtured. And those need to be engaged with for a long period of time. And sometimes in that haste, because it is an external thing being imposed to us, those spaces are not being nurtured enough in us, is what I feel. The second thing is, knowledge by itself, in its deepest meaning, I feel, maybe does not oppress, does not burden, because knowing itself is something that elevates. Knowledge, a true knowledge, would be something that opens out something new. It opens us into a new realm of being. It opens us out into something that illuminates, something that lightens us up. Not something that puts a kind of a burden in us, like a fragrance. So in a true sense of a being, it would not. But where does it become an operation in us? It becomes an operation when we know a lot and yet there is very little, I feel, as Ananya also said, a lived reality in that knowledge. So you know something and yet the being, it has not been widened enough. It is not, it hasn't become really, it hasn't come home to me in terms of an action that I can do, a critical action that I can practice. So if it's only an intellectual knowledge which does not go into something that I live, something I can practice in the small and big sphere, wherever in my life, then somewhere it is like a burden, because I know a lot and yet it has not made that even a little, a kind of a change in my being. So that's the way I feel it rather oppresses rather than liberates. Because often, and I do think that, if you look around us today in urban spaces, even in rural spaces, what you will find in most people is this lack of balance as we are moving ahead. Very few people feel balanced, Somewhere as though, people are getting, there's a lot of tautness in beings, as though, everyone is tense, everyone is underbreathed, everyone is, in a hurry to go somewhere, to do something. There is very little where we are stepping back, where we are also talking about, just to be, just to experience what is it that I am going through, just to be back in balance. That is something that is lacking. And you will find that there's a lot of depression around. I do think that is a malaise that has been visited on our society because of this lack of balance that we have. Even if you look at our academic institutions, what is wrong with society is also what is wrong with academic institutions. The kind of hierarchies that we have, the spaces these are spaces that often do not care, marking systems, the way we mark, this shift, so much of this, emphasis on academic brilliance, so to say, which I don't think often is, it is just regurgitation of something that you understand mentally, but not maybe also within your entire being. So sometimes these spaces don't really care, they are very harsh spaces in some sense. So I do think we are also missing out on this way of, one could even say the epistemology of care, that you can actually know through caring, that caring is a way of knowing. We've forgotten our relational beings, how to relate with each other, how to be with each other, how to learn, how to nourish, how to support each other. So these are also some of the things I feel are very, very important in terms of even the kind of spaces that we have within universities today. So this compassion, this reaching out, this capacity to care, it also has become the space for oneself. So my understanding, my academics, the way I understand it, it's very individualistic in nature. It does not reach out. So I don't know if this is somewhere we can structurally change something in a system so that it becomes something that is much more organic within our beings, which gives us an inherent balance, which also doesn't let us forget all that exists around us, which is a little more gentler in the way we practice things. So that's Just some of the thoughts I thought we could maybe begin with, and then take on more.
I have a question. RTI, including the state chief minister and the education minister, support that we should fail children, and this is the only country out of 192 countries so far, probably history students or political science students will say so far, including this recent one in Sudan, a liberated country. I think this is one of those 5-6 countries which fail children up to class 10. And when we brought out those laws of RTE, then now again opposition come. The question is defining knowledge. The defining knowledge is a standard knowledge is set. Everybody should get that 35-33%. Somehow or anyhow, you should come to that. Otherwise, these children will say that these boys and girls they will say they have given a nice name to CC, continuous comprehensive exploitation. And that's an name given. And teachers also feel that. How this knowledge burden. Second example, let me bring in this NEET examination. Supreme Court interviewed to say NEET examination. There's a board examination. Children secure 90-95. Then also they are unable to make it to the medicine post. Then NEET comes in or IIT entrance comes in, but join the entrance examination. There's some other knowledge which comes in. You have to clear that in order to enter to those meritorious courses. And how this is being addressed by school education or any curriculum, we don't know. That's what I'm saying. The third thing is teacher is overwhelmed with the information he knows. Also, the belief that I know everything, that banking thing of Paulo Freire. So many such things have actually burdened children as well as knowledge. For example, we went to revise the curriculum in 2005, saying that one of the pretext, one of the premise we went with reducing burden and keeping this 1993 Yashwal Committee report. Then one of the guiding principles was reduction of burden on children in the name of schooling. And social science, instead of reducing, it increased leaps and bounds. One is in terms of physical burden you talked about. They introduced economics from class 6, political science. One thing we changed was civics. Civics was to civilize the colonial country. So political science, history, geography. So this they have studied. They will tell you if they want to kill any teacher, that is political science and the social science teacher. Some of my students said. Then one child brought the social science book and he said that you tell me where the social science department, I want to burn this book. These are the truths. We have recorded some of them. The reason being, they were well developed books. Nilagiri was the chairperson of history textbook, and well developed, well built pedagogy embedded in it. But the teacher is completely lack of having a lack of understanding on the new pedagogy. So there are many things are working, and almost sometimes I was trying to read something, then I would say in a way curriculum is dead, so is the school. So this is how probably we may quote of the famous lines of T.S. Eliot, where is the knowledge we are lost in information, and where is the knowledge we are lost in wisdom, where is the wisdom we have lost in living. Almost schools have become, particularly government schools, have become completely, I don't want to say, anti-compassionate to some extent. The result was one of the teachers was stabbed to death. The story goes on, and now each school has given a letter to children, parents, that we have my son is in class 12, we have given an undertaking. These are the things children should not bring. These are the things children should not do. And my son says he's in class 12. He says, "Papa, iske baad main school nahi jaunga." I said, "This is for the good. Take this one." Second one is, my son is in class 12. Let me give you a personal example. Last 6 months I am sleeping for 3 hours because he is sleeping 3 hours. So this is actually this so-called coaching as well as schooling. School says that We will not tell you to come to school after February. That is up to you, but you maintain 75% attendance, somehow you make it. So the whole, I sit in an institution which is responsible for that. And in a way, we actually, how can we free ourselves from the knowledge we assume that is very important, so that we can reduce the burden. And one last thing about teaching of poetry, because you showed that we kid. I tell you, we went to school next to NCRT in Achini. The teacher spent 20 minutes, four finger, four finger. Children were saying, no madam, one finger. that was the thing. Then I went to that, we were observing the classroom almost 15 minutes. अब थोड़ा हिंदी में इसको बता दीजिए. Because the four finger thing is culturally not known to the child. So this cultural gap actually, and poetry, how poetry is tested is very interesting up to class CBSE. Name the poet, then the poet. One question. Or give a title to the poem. Give a title to the poem is someone.
Academics and knowledge. She talked about Buddha. And that inspires me to speak. You know that there was a beautiful story. That story is that after Buddha gained enlightenment, he was asked that, what did you gain? And then Buddha asked, don't ask me that question. Instead ask me another question. What did I lose? And he said, I lost everything. And only when I lost everything and became completely empty, only then enlightenment took place. You know, so I lost because everything was inside. Only so much armor and the clouds came, and I had to give up everything, and then I came. So, you know, the commentator would say that that's the wisdom, that's the true learning. In the true learning, you do not accumulate, you just give up, you know. And when you become empty, and that leads to that eternal eagerness and curiosity that leads to enlightenment and the lightness of being. So, I tend to feel, as Monica ma'am was also saying, that in that many of us tend to carry that burden, you know, that the burden of knowledge. Knowledge as accumulation, knowledge as pride, knowledge as, you know, lot of arrogance of the information that you have acquired, the theories that you have mastered. And that also does great damage to ourselves, that we lose all originality, all curiosity, all emptiness, you know, to rediscover the world once again. Because the mind becomes extremely conditioned and the body. It's like a heavy traffic jam in the mind. Theories, books, information, concepts, all are coming to the mind, and there's a heavy traffic jam. And it is very important, you know, to give up, you know, to unlearn. And then that freshness comes, that freshness that you see in the innocence of a child, or in the innocence of a Buddha's smile, you know. And that is what, you know, leads to that in the lightness of being and the awakening. And the way the education system goes on and the university system function, that to my mind is ultimately doing a great damage to us. What does happen that when we come back, you know, when we leave the university after 8 years, 10 years, from master to PhD, university produces every year large number of cynics, you know, cynics with a heavy burden of theory, information, knowledge, who cannot relate, who cannot smile, who cannot love, you know, who have lost all the faculties, intense faculties of innocence, you know, experiences, and because this entire burden we are carrying, and that's why I think as fragrance, you know, that the fragrance is so important, and then it no longer remains a burden. It's like, you know, to take a mundane illustration, that when you clean your hostel room after 6 months or 8 months, then you see that the many dirt has come into the room, this paper, that thing, and you just throw it, and that day that the room becomes very light, and you feel that today you have a good sleep, and you can walk freely into that room. University is never asking us to give up. It's only asking us to take. As ma'am has said that, are you reading this book? Are you reading that? Are you doing this? Everybody is in rush. You know, And that I think has killed us. It's like everyday murdering is taking place. Every day we are killed in the classrooms. So that is where you are. It's good that the reference of Buddha came. I tend to agree with that.
When I read the email, the title itself, Burden of Knowledge, was very provocative. At the same time, I was disturbed. I couldn't understand it. He helped me. Someone joined me. Who could a knowledge be a burden? It's very difficult for me to accept. How could knowledge be a burden? I talking about the processes how we consume this knowledge exactly, or the knowledge itself. I could not understand through this discussion actually. Is it knowledge or is a burden? I don't know. And the process how I convey this knowledge, how I use this knowledge. Maybe that is the point of contestation. There we different. For example, Professor Alex Honeth, I was listening to him. He says that school, though it's an agency, but it itself has its compulsion. It cannot produce knowledge. It just reproduce. And it depends on preschool cultural resources from where we come. So we come from different cultural resources. And it just sustain and promote. That's it does not in itself create a kind of knowledge or burdening. You already has been burdened. So that's why in any democratic society, its education is not the institution which actually political institution or parties will support, because any political system, any kind of system will survive without having an education institution also. The more the dictatorial kind of system is, the less the preference will be given to any kind of education system, because it has a capacity to survive on its own. Political institution can bypass. So the moment we raise the question, the burden of knowledge, or whether the last question you raised, that whether education can play any role, it itself raises doubt that yes, it has failed actually. It has failed, and why we need to answer this question. So the question is, how knowledge could be a burden?
I think what you're trying to ask is, what sir also was talking about is burden of curriculum. And is curriculum synonymous with knowledge? Or
Is it
what
school?
is?
Are you talking about institution or college?
No, that's the same in school as well as higher education in college. Curriculum is more than a student can internalize.
It's also a good deal because teachers don't connect the various fragments of the curriculum in imaginative ways. And therefore there is this not only compartmentalization of knowledge, there's also a different world that the child goes to. That's not his world, that's not the world around him. So he goes into another world, he needs to understand it.
From 2 days back. Today we are just having our exams in schools. So yesterday there was a mathematics test for the FA3 thing. FA3, formative assessment, part 3. So this is my friend's class, it's 5th class, and there was a question where a child was supposed to answer that if one ticket costs you 2.5 rupees, then what will be the cost of 12 tickets? So any answers to that? Yeah. Any?
30 rupees.
30 rupees. The child wrote 24 rupees and 600 paisa. Now the teacher was like, from whom you copied this? Now tell me, is it a knowledge of burden for the teacher or the student? My question is, who decides? Who decides for whom is the burden of knowledge? Is the moment you decide that this is the right answer, somewhere you limited yourself to see that there is a child who probably not thinking in the exact manner the way you are thinking. First. Second is from my own class. I'm teaching class 4.
Team, magazine team occupies, it's not just the magazine, they do several other activities. And what really struck me and inspired me was the mandate she set for herself isn't something which she wants to do for somebody else or for showing something. It's something that she wants to do for not just herself, not just for others, but for everybody, all of this and more than this. So beginning with that,
point about how knowledge becomes a burden because we don't create a space within ourselves to take that knowledge. So all these sentences, for me, they are like a living journey that I've gone through in this room for this 1 hour, and I will be in this journey for a long time. Several other ideas that have struck me very intensely, very deeply and very profoundly. One is the idea by Anthony about the nature of the learner. The nature of the learner is so much of an individual entity that if we speak about unburdening or if we speak about hope, a pedagogy of hope, education as a project of hope, probably education or schooling cannot do it. It is wider social processes, maybe wider political processes, I don't know, but not the learner. Then this comment about goal of education, goal of life, attainment of peace, the metaphor of Buddha, all these are words that have actually opened a light within me, and I am enjoying this light, and this is a unique creative contribution that the new Leave has made for me. I consider myself part of it. So that's where I would like to end.